Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am going to give it just a minute here to allow everyone to come in through the waiting room, get their audio connected so you can hear us. So today is the Post-Secondary Perkins Administrator Cohort Meeting. My name is Brittany Boston, and I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support, and I will be helping facilitate the meeting today, as well as helping with any technical issues any of you may experience. And so before I hand it over to ICCB, which is why you are all here, I do want to take care of a few housekeeping items. You do have the ability as a participant on the call today to turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and engage with us. If you have a question or a comment, you also can do that by typing that into the chat box as well. And we are recording today's session, so if you have information that was shared that you want to reference back to, or something that you would like to share out with a colleague, this will be a resource for you to utilize as well. And so with that, I will hand the reins over to Natasha Allen with ICCB.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Good afternoon, everyone. We are so happy that you've joined us today on this rainy St. Patty's Day for the fiscal year 2022 Post-Secondary Perkins Guidelines and Perkins Administrator Cohort Meeting. It's very strange to think that last year at this time, we were all gathered together in a huge group in a big room at a hotel. So it's funny to see how things have changed in just a year. But we will persist as we always do. All right, let's go to the next slide. Perfect, thank you. So for today's agenda, we have a really great meeting set up for you all. We're going to start it off a little bit differently with a presentation from the amplifund Grant Management System team. And then I will go over the fiscal year 22 Perkins local application materials and documents. We'll then hear about data analysis for your FY22 Perkins application from Jay Brooks at ICCB. We'll then talk about grant administration and monitoring, and then end the meeting with a spring professional development update and an overview of the tips modules from Dr. Amy Julian, excuse me, and Brittany Boston from the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. So, like I said, we are going to begin this meeting a little bit differently than usual. You know, typically we start with talking about the application materials, but today we thought it was prudent that we begin with a presentation from amplifund. So as some of you may know, the state of Illinois is moving to a unified centralized grants management system. So what that means is that every grant you apply for from the state of Illinois will be housed in this one system. So that'll be a great thing, but it'll also be a learning curve, a learning process. So the amplifund team has so graciously volunteered and agreed to give you a presentation on how to access the system, as well as how to apply for a grant through the amplifund system. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the amplifund team.
Thank you, Tasha. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe Byer, a business analyst with amplifund. And everyone should be able to see my screen right now. Today, what we'll do is we'll kind of go through a little demonstration of the grantee experience in regards to submitting an application through amplifund. So the first thing that I'm going to do is navigate to grants.illinois.gov. I don't want to go to the portal just yet. I'll navigate to grantee links and grantee portal. So one thing to keep in mind is that there's a single sign-on process between amplifund and the Illinois GATA grantee portal. So what I'm going to do is sign in here. If you don't have an account, you're able to create an account and then link it to your organization using a DUNS number. So I'll click sign in. It will take me to the illinois.gov authentication portal where I can enter in my username and password. This logs me into my grantee portal account. What I can do from here is if I navigate back to the Illinois portal, from here I can navigate to the CSFA. If we're browsing a list of current funding opportunities for when this opportunity is posted, we'll be able to see it on this list. As an example, today I'm going to show you another opportunity that is currently live within our system from ICCB, the CTE Early School Leaver Transition Program. If I click on that opportunity, this should all look pretty familiar. As we're looking at things in the CSFA, we have our standard information. You'll notice within the grant application link, there is a direct link to amplifund for which you can copy and paste into your browser. I do want to point out that if I click on opportunity, PDF will open with the same information. That same link is here and I'm able to click on that link and it'll take me right into amplifund. So what we're looking at now that we're in amplifund is the actual opportunity itself. This is what we're familiar with as the NOFO details. You'll have all of your information included on this page. Project information, agency contacts, the funding information, if there's an award ceiling or floor. All of the typical information that you see in your NOFO will be housed on this page. One thing I do like to point out is that we have a submission timeline. So within amplifund, the application will be open for the date specified here. If I go into amplifund for this specific opportunity and wish to apply on May 1st, the system will not allow me to apply. So these are going to be hard deadlines for when the application needs to be submitted. The information may vary based on the opportunity or program itself, but all of these sections, you'll see all the information that you're used to viewing in the standard NOFO. If I scroll back up to the top, you'll also see that we have a tab for evaluation and scoring criteria. Just another standard section of the NOFO, now housed on a separate tab so that you're easily able to see the criteria that your applications will be based on. Some information about the review and selection process and anticipated announcement dates. Across the top, we have a couple different options. I'm able to print this if I want to, save a copy of this opportunity or NOFO on my computer and maybe share with some other staff. You have the ability to download it. You have the ability to save it, and we have the ability to apply. We also have a help section. And if I click on help, you'll find some information populated here. This will vary by program, so you may see some different contact information for application help or for technical help. There's also a help document guide, which is a user guide for the amplifund applicant portal, which is 20 pages, 20 plus pages of information on how to complete an application with an amplifund, everything that we'll go over today. What I'm going to do now is navigate into a test opportunity since I don't want to submit a test application to a program that's live with ICCB currently. So you'll see here we have a lot of the same information except this one is a demo. What we'll do when we're ready to apply is we can either click on login or we can click on apply, which will take us to that illinois.gov authentication portal. At that point, we will select public account. and enter in our credentials. And again, these are the credentials that you use to sign into the GATA grantee portal. So it shows that I'm working. I can now see that I'm logged in. I see my name across the top of the screen. Now I can go ahead and click apply when we're ready to start an application. The first page of the application within the amplifund applicant portal is always going to be this project information page. It's going to ask for some base information. It's going to require us to provide an application name. So I'll enter something in here now. It's going to tell us our pre-qualification status from the GATA grantee portal so that it's visible for us. It's also going to ask us how much we're requesting for this opportunity. One thing I do want to point out is that if there is an award floor and award ceiling, the system will not allow you to enter anything outside of that range. So for this opportunity, I believe there is an award ceiling of $60,000. If I try and request $750,000, I get this validation message telling me that I'm requesting more than what I'm allowed to. If we have match contributions required, we're able to enter those in here as well. And this information that we enter in here will tie to our budget, which we'll get to a little bit later in the process. On this project information page, we also have some basic information to populate. We'll just enter in some test information. And we'll notice that certain fields have an asterisk next to them. That means they are going to be required within amplifund. Until all required fields are filled out, you will not be able to submit your application. So what I can do from here, now that I have some information populated, I have the ability to save. You'll notice I also have the ability to mark as complete and save and continue. If I click save and continue, it's going to take me to the next section of the application, which is going to be our application forms. In order to submit our application, each of these sections needs to be marked as complete. So if I jump ahead to application forms, either by clicking the application form section from our status bar here, or clicking save and continue, you'll notice that my project information does not have a check mark. It means I haven't marked it as complete. It means I will not be able to submit my application until that's done. So if I navigate back to the project information, what I'm going to do is check mark as complete. And again, I can either hit save and continue to get to the next section, or I can simply find it on the status bar and click on it here. Now that we are in the application form section, you'll notice that since I marked the project information section as complete, I get that nice check mark. Within the application form section, here I see all of the forms that I'm required to fill out. This may vary based on the program and how it's set up within amplifund, but to give you an example of how to complete application forms, we'll use these examples. So that first form is labeled instructions. It's a reference page, has some information, has some links that we can click on, and just some general information. If I keep scrolling down, I see that there's an acknowledgement section, and I see the little asterisk next to name, title, and date. So what that's telling me is that these are required fields in order to mark this application form as complete. I can do is if it's incomplete, I can go ahead and save that. It saves successfully, but I also get a message telling me that this field is required. I'm going to get that same message if I try and mark as complete. I get an error, and again, it populates here telling me that this field is required. Now, I do have the ability to save with the information I've populated, move on to the next form, and then let's say I need to go back. You have the ability to navigate back and forth between application forms. One thing I do want to point out is that we now have a status. Since I've started filling out information on that first form, the status has moved to in progress. The other forms I haven't looked at or entered any information for yet, so those are going to be in a status of new. I will jump into the next application form. This is the uniform grant application. Should be something that everyone is familiar with, applying for opportunities within the state. It's that standard uniform grant application template. It's going to look slightly different than what you're used to seeing as it's built out in amplifund now, but all the information is going to be the same, where we're looking for that applicant information, contact information for someone involved with the program matters, contact information for someone involved with the business and administrative matters, areas affected. Are they affected by the project? And here's a good place where I can show you what the conditional formatting will look like within amplifund. You'll notice if I select no, nothing else happens. I can move on to the next question. If I select yes, I get a little pop-up telling me to list the areas affected by the project. So keep in mind, depending on your answers to certain questions, you may see additional questions pop up. Standard questions from the uniform grant application. You'll notice that single line text fields appear as such, where you can enter in alphanumeric characters. We have multi-line text boxes where you're able to change the formatting, make something bold, add bullets, whatever it may be. You're able to make the formatting fit your needs. You'll also have the ability to add attachments. If there's a field for you to add an attachment on this opportunity for this program, simply clicking choose file will pull up your Windows browser and you'll be able to select a file and attach it. Some additional information about the project is going to be on the uniform grant application form. And lastly, the applicant certification where you're agreeing to these terms. We do have some notes at the bottom of the page here to state when you're finished answering the questions on this page, mark it as complete. Something we briefly touched on earlier where, at the end of this process, when you're ready to submit your application, when you put together all of your information, filled out your budget, everything will need to be marked as complete in order to submit. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this as complete. If I click save and continue, it's going to jump me into the next application form. And I'm just going to see, we have a couple questions here in chat. Maybe we can address these at the end. So we would have another application form. Please enter your scope of work. For purposes of this demo, these fields aren't required, but it's likely when you're filling out your application for this program that you're going to have many required fields. So here's where I enter my scope of work. Again, we have the ability to add a numbered list, bullets, any type of formatting that you're used to, and maybe Microsoft Word you have the ability to do here. Or again, you have the ability to upload a document by simply clicking on the choose file button. If I mark as complete, what I want to do is go back to application forms and just show you how the status updates so that you can keep track. Excuse me, let me. Figure out what happened here. Give me just a second and let me see what's going on.
So Joe, I'm wondering while you're troubleshooting that, if we could go ahead and go through some of the questions. I know some are being addressed in the chat, but just so they don't get lost and everyone kind of gets to hear them as well. Is there a recommended browser to be used when accessing the portal?
Yeah, so I think Kaylee posted in the chat, but amplifund does support Google Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, and Apple Safari. I think versions 10 and later. I can also show everyone a little later on when I get to our support site where we're able to find that information. But we do support those 4 major browsers, Google Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, and Apple Safari.
And then we did have a question about whether or not the demo could be clipped out from the whole meeting and sent out. We do have the ability to crop this particular section out, and we can share that with ICCB to share out with the proper listservs, so that way you can share with your financial department or whoever you would like to have this walkthrough and information as well. We can absolutely make that available to you guys.
And this is Ben Klein with amplifund. We will be doing training and making training resources available to you in the future too. So don't feel like you have to capture everything today, but yeah, I think as Brittany said, though, this can be made available.
Okay, perfect. Because that was one other question, is if there will be a step-by-step handout that will be provided. But Ben, you had just mentioned some additional trainings coming up.
Yeah, and when Joe, I think it's towards the end of the demo, we'll show you some of the support resources. It's all online. We have a support site that you'll be able to access, but we'll get to that before we conclude.
Okay, wonderful. And Joe, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm just trying to give you some time to work out the kinks there.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
Can there be more than one user per community college in the GATA grantee portal?
Yes, and that's the intention, is for the people involved in the process will need that sign-on and be an amplifund. We have different roles, security roles based on tasks available. But yes, it does require that login though.
See another question from Shannon asking if a copy of all the various forms can be emailed out to grant managers. What we do have the ability to do from amplifund is download a copy of that, and you're able to share that with whomever.
Joe,
Yeah.
This is Tasha. Yeah, so for this year, and honestly, probably for the foreseeable future, just because Perkins has so many intricate little tables and details and things like that, what we'll be doing is uploading all the documents to the system. So you will be able to download those documents, configure them, fill them out however you want, and then re-upload them to the system before the application closes. And so what will more likely than not happen for, say, like our competitive CTE leadership grants, we will build those into the system because they're a lot less intricate. But for Perkins Basics, we will be uploading documents and then you can download those. So it's really not that much different than usual. It's just easier. You can upload them all to the system as opposed to sending us emails into the CTE mailbox. So I hope that answers your question.
I see we have another question. Will the Illinois GATA ICQ as well as the programmatic risk questionnaire be contained within the system? And I believe the programmatic risk questionnaire will be one of the application forms that we look at that will be tied to your to this opportunity. The GATA ICQ will remain within the GATA grantee portal. So how that's handled today will remain going forward.
That's correct. Yes. For the programmatic risk assessment, we will be utilizing the same process as we always do. The link is actually in the guidelines document that I sent out yesterday, but I'll be sending out a separate email that has the link as well, and then also the link to the GATA grantee portal where you can fill out your ICQ, which is extremely important to make sure you fill out that ICQ, because we cannot grade, quote unquote, grade your application until you have completed the ICQ. It will not physically let us. So please make sure you get those done as soon as possible.
And so Tasha, can I step out on a limb here and say that I will save the questions being asked today as well, in case we cannot get to all of them. And then would it be possible for the CTE team to put together an amplifund FAQ to send out?
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, I have some of my team looking into, I think there may have been some unexpected maintenance happening right now. So we're looking into that right now. While we're waiting, what I can do is skip ahead a little bit and discuss our support site. This information was available within that help section, which had the link, but our support site is il-amplifund.zendesk.com. And I'm already logged in. Let me sign out to show everyone what it will look like. The first time you access this page, you'll be prompted to sign in to Illinois Grant Management Support. If you are a new user, there's a little link here stating new to Illinois Grant Management Support, sign up. If you click the sign up button, it will ask for your name and email address. Anyone is welcome to register for an account with our support site. You'd simply fill this information in, click sign up, and you would receive an email where you will then be prompted to create your password. I already have access, so I'm going to log in. And this is what our support site is going to look like. I have a little bit of a different view than everyone will have, but the main content is all going to be the same. So we have different sections bucketed out where, you know, we have information for our state agencies, a start here with some basic information about the project, a grantee information section, which is going to be useful for everyone on this call today. There are a couple videos within this section talking to the sign-on process through the GATA grantee portal. Also, I believe there is an applicant portal training video similar to what we're doing today. But there's all other resources available to you where you can find a list of every user guide within amplifund. We have a library of step-by-step instructions if you're maybe having trouble with the specific process. We have a section with upcoming trainings and videos, a frequently asked questions section. And then lastly, at the bottom, you'll see you have the ability to submit a support ticket if you're logged into our support site. When you click on submit a ticket, a pop-up window will appear. You'll be prompted to enter in a couple pieces of information, mainly just a title for your request and a description of what you're asking or what your issue is. This will be submitted directly to our customer support team, who will respond within a 2-hour window. Our support hours are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So anytime you submit a support ticket, within those hours, you can expect to receive a response within a 2-hour window. So it's a good resource to have all this information available. We do have a nice search bar at the top. You mentioned someone had asked about what browsers are supported. What I could do is search our support site, start typing in browsers, and I get some suggestions. That first article being, which browsers does amplifund support? I click on that, it takes me to a link. That information is spelled out for me here. It'll also show me some other articles within the section. You know, which file types are allowed for uploading into amplifund. While we were in that applicant portal, we saw you may have the ability to upload files. Well, maybe you want to know what file types are allowed. And if you search our support site, you're easily able to find that information. A question from Sharon is all information we're seeing today already active and available once I sign into the GATA portal? I don't believe the information for this specific program is completed yet.
Sharon, this is Tasha from ICCB. The Perkins application will open on Monday, the 22nd. So at that point, all of the applicable documents will be available to access.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Tasha, we did have a few questions coming through, and I don't know if this is something you can answer or the individuals from amplifund, but when it comes to actually getting access to the accounts and getting that permission in the grants.gov, how do they go about doing that? Do they need to go to their fiscal department? Should someone already have that access that can put them in? Who should they reach out to?
I'm not entirely sure, other than what Joe went over in the beginning of the presentation about requesting a sign-on. I'm not sure if there is someone institutionally who you'll have to speak to in your finance office. I'm not sure. Anyone from amplifund have any insight on that?
Maybe a question we need to go back to get you with. I'm not 100% familiar with the permission levels of the grantee portal. And hopefully everyone can see my screen. Just talked with my IT team, and it looks like we're back up and running. So we can jump back into that application. What I do want to point out is you'll notice I'm not in the application. I'm back to that main opportunity details page where we see all of our NOFO information, net evaluation and scoring. What I can do from here, instead of clicking apply, since I know I've already started an application and I'm logged in, I can click on the logo in the top left corner of the page. And you'll see I have quite a few test applications started for my account. But I do know that the one we were working on was demo application March 17th, 2021. I can see that it's unsubmitted. So I want to hop back into that. I can simply click on the application name. So this is a way you can get back into your application. I'm not sure how likely it is that everyone completes their entire application in one day. So having the ability to log out and log back in and access your saved application would be done again by clicking on that logo. If I go to application forms, back to what we had previously completed, I can see that my instructions are in progress. The uniform grant application is now complete. The scope of work is complete. The next steps I have are to fill out these last 3 application forms and also finish and mark as complete my instruction form. One thing I do want to point out though, is that as you're going through the application, we have the status bar to navigate back and forth. At any point in time, you're able to go back to those opportunity details. If you want to review, the description, or, there was some submission information that you needed to review. Or maybe you just want to look at the evaluation criteria to make sure that you're filling out your application to meet the specified criteria. So being able to navigate back and forth while you're working on the application, so that information is always going to be readily available for you. So we're just going to go through the remaining application forms and mark as complete. So I think I need to add a date. Once I add a date, I have the ability to mark as complete. I get that success message. If I navigate back to the application forms at the top, I can now see that that's complete. At any point in time, I also have the ability to print this application form with the information I filled out. I'm going to jump into the remaining 3 application forms where we have a work plan, which is, very similar to that scope of work, where I would enter my work plan here. Maybe I want to add some formatting. Whatever it may be. Or again, as we talked about, depending on how this program is set up, you may have the ability within amplifund to upload a file. Again, simply clicking choose file and selecting any file from your window. I'm going to mark as complete and save and continue. Here's where we see the programmatic risk assessment questionnaire. Everyone should be familiar, if we filled any of these out in the past, with the first 4 sections. It may look a little different in amplifund, but we know it's mainly a series of yes/no questions. Thankfully for this demo, most of these fields are not marked as required, so you don't have to watch me go through and enter every single question. But I do want to point out again where there may be some conditional formatting. You'll see here we have a question: does the organization have a time and effort system to track program-specific work performed? If I select no, I can just move on to question 1.5. However, if I select yes, I get a subsequent series of questions regarding that time and effort system. So as you're going through the application, just keep in mind that you may see some conditional formatting where questions will now appear and potentially be required depending on your response. Sharon asked, is it possible to mark a form as complete even though it's not complete? No, you're not able to, but it is dependent on required fields. We'll notice that all of these questions, we don't see that little asterisk that we saw, so it's not required. I am able to mark as complete since there were no required fields. However, if I go back to my application forms, and let's go back to the instructions, and what I can do is mark as in progress. So let's say I completed it, but I did it on accident. If I remove this date field, I hit save, and I try and mark as complete without anything populated in this field, which is designated with an asterisk telling me it's required, I get this application error message telling me one or more fields have invalid entries. So once I have information populated there in that required field, I do have the ability to mark as complete and the ability to save and continue. Navigating back to application forms, I see I have everything complete except this last form. We'll see that This has an asterisk, so it's telling me it's required. So here's where I would document the need to serve out of school youth or whatever the question may be for this program. And just keeping in mind that this is an example program. I'm just going to enter some information there, designating a response. And we're just going to copy and paste because I know that they're required, and in order to mark as complete, I need to have information there. Again, a common thing you may see on these forms is just that reminder to mark as complete. I get that success message since all of the required fields were filled out. And now what I can do, if I hit save and continue, it's going to jump me into the budget. I also noticed that my application forms section on the status bar has that nice check mark that we're looking for. Within the budget, we have our budget instructions. These are going to be similar if you've used the GATA standard statewide budget template. Just the way you enter things will be a little bit different. You'll notice we have all of the standard categories available that are available on that statewide budget template. If we remember, I requested $45,000. And what we can do to start entering subline items for our categories is simply clicking on the green plus sign to add a line item. So training and education, training seminar, cost rate is $10,000. You'll notice some of these fields are required as well, designated with an asterisk. But if I'm going through two of them, my direct cost is going to be $20,000. If we do have non-grant funded monies, you have the ability to select whether it's non-grant funded, so whether it's your match. You have the ability to type in a narrative. And once you have all that information populated, if you go ahead and click create, I now see that $20,000 attributed to training seminar. We have some view settings at the top where I didn't enter any match, so I'm going to hide the non-grant funded column. Can always just bring it right back with a click of a mouse. And also you have the ability to hide line items. So for right now with what I have entered, we see training seminar. If I hide that line item, I can say, well, I just have a total of $20,000 budgeted for training and education. You will go through and complete this budget, entering in the amount up to the amount you are requesting. Now, one thing that does happen is, at the beginning of your application, you may have said, all right, I need to request $45,000, but as you're filling out your budget, maybe it changed to $47,000. What can be done at that point in time is we can navigate back to our project information section and change this from $45,000 to $47,000. If I go ahead and hit save, and I think I hit the help button. If I navigate back to our budget section, we'll now see that my total grant funding needs to add up to $47,000. And in order to be able to mark the budget as complete, the total overall budget cost must be $0. So everything must total up to that $47,000 or the amount we're requesting. And those totals for match would also get pulled in as well if that's something that's being used. So I'm just going to add a simple line item here. For sake of moving through this, we're going to say all of our budget is directed towards training and equipment. Again, I have the ability to provide a narrative. You'll see that in certain areas you have the ability to provide attachments. If you needed to provide an attachment, the same functionality is on the application form. Simply click choose file and you'll be able to select from your window browser. And I'm going to go ahead and click complete. I now see that my budget totals up to $47,000 of what I'm requesting. Now I have the ability to mark this as complete. If you don't make a correction on the amount requested in the project information form, your total here will not update. So if I needed to add more than 47,000 to my budget, right now I would not be able to and mark as complete. I would need to update that on the project information page, which validates here to this. And for everyone else, I was responding to one of the questions in chat. So now that my budget totals up, have the ability to mark as complete. If I hit save and continue, it's going to take me to our performance plan. What I do want to show you though, is that budget. We have that nice check mark. We see our last item on the status bar is going to be submit. If I navigate to submit right now, you'll notice I have everything complete except for the performance plan. When I get to this submit page, the button is grayed out. And when I click on it, nothing happens. In order to submit our application, all of these need to be marked as complete. All required fields need to be filled in. At that point in time, as long as we were within the application submission time range, we will be able to submit our application. On this submission page, we also have a little review button. What this is going to do is download this opportunity, this no phone application with everything you've entered. So it's common that I see applicants downloading a copy of their application before they submit it so that they have a hard copy saved for their records. So what I'm going to do is navigate back to performance plan. Performance plan will be visible on the opportunity if it's something that's being used. If it's not being used for a particular opportunity, this bullet will not be there and you won't have a little asterisk to complete. But when it is used, this is what you'll see. For this example, you'll notice that we have 5 different performance plans. This first one is marked with an asterisk telling me that this one is required. I'll see all of these other ones are not required, so I have the ability to add goals, but I'm not able to mark as complete until I have a goal for student recruitment. So if I click on the little plus sign to add a goal, we'll see that this goal type was set up as a numeric goal. You would name your goal. Your number to be achieved, we'll say 50, and you have the ability to enter a description in here. From there, you can simply click save. I see that my goal is added. Maybe I want to break out my goals by quarter. You have the ability to add multiple goals. We have a goal for student retention, which is going to show us a different goal type. Where we can either choose percentage achieved or percentage changed. So depending on how the application for this opportunity is configured, you may have the ability to select different performance goal types. Percent achieved. Enrollment, maybe we want to increase our enrollment by, 25%. And again, you have the ability to enter in a description, or that was student retention, not enrollment. But really the main functionality to look at is, the goal type. If we do percentage change, maybe our desired percentage is 75%, and our current percentage, we know we're at 65%. You have the ability to enter that information here, and again with a description. Oops. We have some other goal types. As we know, we don't see an asterisk here, so these are not required. What I do want to look at is the sample strategy to give you an idea of all of the goal types available within the application. Again, this will be configured by ICCB, and they'll be telling you which ones you can choose or which ones you can't. This one will be an example of all of them. You have the ability to select a milestone goal. You have the ability to select a narrative goal. Maybe you're just, spelling out something that you're working on. We looked at numeric, where you have a number to be achieved. We looked at that percent achieved, where you enter in your desired percentage. We looked at percent change, where you can put in the current percentage versus the percentage that you're looking to get to. And lastly, you have reimbursement. If there's a number or rate, you have the ability to enter that information as well. Let's just say this is a milestone where we'll go back to enrollment and maybe it's had 50 new students enroll, and then you have the ability to attach a due date. And we want to get that done by, October 31st. Now that I have some goals added, and more importantly, I have a goal added for our required performance plan, I can go ahead and mark as complete. When I hit save and continue, it's going to take me to that submit page. You'll see now that the submit button is green, meaning I can actually click on it. Everything is complete. Again, I have the ability to click on review. When I click on review, it's going to download a folder with all of these application forms that I filled out. You'll see it come in a zip folder, and it'll have all the materials that you populated so that you're able to save a copy of your for your records. And lastly, when I know I have everything complete, I'm within the correct time range, I have the ability to finally click on submit. I get this nice success message. You have submitted your application. It tells me I can download the completed application by clicking application below. I can return to the main screen with all my applications by clicking on the exit button. What I am going to do is, someone asked in the chat, is it possible to download a copy of the full application prior to submission? Yes, and that can be done, from our opportunity details or evaluation. Even if we're not logged in, across the top, we have these buttons where we have the ability to print this. We have the ability to access our help information. We also have the ability to download the entire application packet. We looked at this a little bit earlier, but if I click on the ICCB logo in the top left corner, it takes me into all of my applications for my grantee organization. This looks a little clustered from all the test applications I've been submitting, but here I can find that demo application for March 17th. I can see that it's now in a status of submitted. I can see some other basic details. When that application window was opened and when it closes. And that will be the process for submitting your application through the amplifund applicant portal. I'm sure we have plenty of questions in chat.
Yes, we do have quite a few questions. Obviously, new process means new questions. And so I'll help navigate through some of these. And I think, Tasha, this one may be for ICCB, because I want to say, Aubrey, when you were asking about being able to download the full application, I'm assuming you're meaning you want to be able to see the full application so that you can start compiling all of the information before you upload it into the amplifund system. So Tasha, will the CTE application be uploaded on the ICCB website as it has been in years past?
Yeah, that's definitely something we can think about. I think for Perkins, it won't be as big of a deal since, as I said before, all of those forms for the grant application can just be downloaded right from the system. And so it really virtually would be the same thing as if we posted them on the website. But I think for competitive grants, I think like Joe just said, you do have the ability to download that application if you want to, like Aubrey said, make sure everything's correct and cross all the T's, dotted all the I's before you upload it back into the system. But please correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. I thought you just said that, but I may have misheard.
Say that again. I apologize.
That's okay. So like for the ESLTP grant, you can download the full application, correct?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought you said. Yep, just making sure.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're, right now we're looking at it from the application that I submitted, but initially before I clicked apply, I think we just saw the opportunity, details, and evaluation and scoring. That download feature is still available there where you'll be able to download those details as well as the entire application packet.
Great, thank you.
And then when you're seeing the submission, is that being seen by the DUNS number or by email account?
So it's going to be seen by the grantee organization account, so by DUNS number. So when I'm looking here at all these applications, this is for the grantee organization that I'm a user in. If I go back to that GATA portal, it's my organization name is Streamlink Software. This is going to be all applications for Streamlink Software, which is one DUNS number.
Okay, and so we did have a few questions regarding the budget portion. Naturally, that's where a lot of our questions lie. So will this be eliminating the Excel worksheets for the budget and using the budget capabilities within the amplifund program?
So yes, and I actually exchanged a couple of direct messages with Kaylee, and she confirmed that I'm not a complete moron. When I was trying to upload the budget, and I was actually planning to use the budget template in amplifund. However, as all of you know, Perkins funds cannot be expended on all of those budget categories that are in the uniform budget. And so currently the system does not allow you to remove budget categories. So this year for Perkins, yes, we will still be utilizing the Excel template, much to everyone's chagrin, probably.
Okay, and if that's the case, and if I jump back into this application, what you'll see when you're going through it across the status bar is you just won't see this budget section here. How it will likely be set up, and it's obviously subject to change, and however it is, it'll likely look similar to this work plan where, we may have an attachment here telling you, hey, download a copy of our Excel budget and then, upload it here. If that's the path that you take for this program, it'll look something similar to one of these forms.
Great, thank you. And Tasha, did you say the application is being released on the 22nd? Is that correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So,
yep. And then I'll go into more detail on that when we get into the bulk of the rest of the presentation. But yes, it will be released at 12:01 a.m. on Monday, the 22nd.
So get started bright and early on that.
Yeah, please don't. I mean, I hope you're sleeping at that point, but you can do what you want.
Okay, I'm making my way through some of these questions here. And please, if we do not have time to get to your question, like I said, I will be downloading all of the conversation that has been happening in the chat today and sharing that with ICCB so we can get your questions answered.
We probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll get on to the rest of the presentation. Sorry, Joe, I think I cut you off.
No, that's okay. That's perfect. I was going to say I do need to hop off for another obligation here in a couple minutes, so that works.
I think we did have a question for you, Joe, actually. So, Brittany, if you want to answer, let's see. So the question is, could Joe go over briefly what our first steps are in creating an account and logging into amplifund?
Yep, I can do that. So what we'll be utilizing is a single sign-on process through the GATA grantee portal. So the first step is going to be creating an account in the grantee portal. Let me sign out here and actually I'll navigate back there. If I can find the link. So if I navigate to that grantee portal, you'll see we have a couple different options where I'm able to sign in. If we don't have an account, it's my understanding that you're able to click on create account and sign up for an account. And what you'll do once you create your own account with a username that you set up, you'll be able to register that account with a DUNS number. That DUNS number will link it to your grantee organization. Someone within your organization who currently has access will need to approve that access. And once you do have that access, you can simply sign in with the username that you set up and password. Also, if I log out, close out of that. Let's go back to that without being logged in. What I can do is click on login or click on apply. You'll notice that I'm not logged in and I still have the ability to download this opportunity and application packet. I still have the ability to click on help and kind of go through all that information. You'll see that, we have a support email address. You can also see that our support site email address or website is listed there. But if I click log in, it takes me to that illinois.gov authentication portal. From here, I would be selecting public account and I would enter in my credentials that I've just created or use for the GATA grantee portal. So through that single sign-on with my GATA grantee portal access, it logs me into amplifund. You're welcome, Brad.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and move on to the next portion of the presentation. If anyone has any questions, we can try and answer those at the end of this next section of the presentation. Or like Brittany said, we'll gather them in the chat, get those answers for you, and then we'll get an FAQ out. But I want to thank our amplifund team so much for agreeing to come on and do this demonstration for us. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I can stop sharing so that you're able to share again. And thanks for your time, everyone, and have a great day.
Here.
Thank you too. Okay. Oh, thank you, Anne. All right. So, just a really good example of having to think on your feet. My internet went out at about noon today. So Anne is driving the presentation. but thankfully for technology, I'm able to access Zoom on my phone, so you still get to hear my lovely voice. All righty, so we're going to move right along into the next section of our presentation today, and that's discussing the specifics of the Perkins local application materials. So I know that it's going to be different with the amplifund system, but hopefully once everyone gets logged on, everything will go smoothly. It's really not going to be that much different. Really the biggest change is that all of the documents are going to be housed on that one system. And then, like I said, downloaded and re-uploaded to the system, as opposed to making sure they get sent to the ICCB mailbox and all that jazz. So, so we thank you for your patience, and this is definitely a learning process for us as well. But again, you know, we want to say a big thanks to the amplifund team for getting on. Okay, so what needs to be submitted this year? So really the biggest change for documents that need to be submitted this year are two big things. You don't have to submit the application narrative, which, if you recall from last year, that's the portion of the local application where you had to identify your long-term goals, annual objectives, etc. You also don't need to submit the Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, or CLNA. And those are really the two biggest parts of the application narrative. So, excuse me, the local application. So that should make you feel a little bit better. You do have the ability, and I made a note here at the bottom of the slide. As I just said, you're not required this year to submit an application narrative. However, if you wish to make minimal changes to, say, your annual objectives or your long-term goals, if you want to make changes to those, please send a supplemental document to the ICC mailbox or to your Perkins liaison. I'm not going to upload the application narrative document into amplifund. I don't want to confuse people and make them think they have to submit that again this year. So if you want to make changes, or if you are required to make changes based on feedback you received from your Perkins liaison last year after reviewing your grant, please just submit that in a supplemental form. You can do that however you want. It can be a basic Word document. You can submit what you submitted last year with maybe some red font, just so we can note the differences. However you want it is best for you, but just make sure that you submit that by May 14th before the application's due. So, all righty. So, what does need to be submitted this year? You have to submit the application cover page, the performance data analysis, which is something that we did not have to submit last year. For those of you who have been around for a little bit, this is fairly similar to that accountability data snapshot that we used to do. So it's similar to that. You also have to submit the performance improvement plan, a programs of study narrative, and a programs of study inventory. Now, I will go obviously into details about all of these things. So your annual work plan has to be submitted, as well as the uniform budget and your acknowledgement of grant processes document. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we have gone over, oh, there we go, okay. So as we've gone over a couple times now, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone's clear. So the application will be available. It'll be open and available for you to access at 12:01 on Monday, the 22nd. Please be asleep at that time, but I cannot control what you do. So if you want to log on at 12:01 to amplifund and start the Perkins application process, please feel free. The Perkins application is due by 11:30 p.m. on Friday, May 14th. please note, this is very important. Amplifund will not accept late submissions. That means that we cannot grant you an extension for your application submission. So please, please, please submit your applications by 11:30 p.m. on May 14th. If you don't, it's going to cause problems, and we just want to avoid that. All righty. Okay, so the first part of the application, per usual, is the application cover page. This looks the same as it has for I don't know how many years since I've been here. You are required to provide basic contact information for the primary Perkins, secondary Perkins, and your grant fiscal contact. For your primary Perkins contact, please make sure this is the person who we will be communicating with the most. I mean, what we don't want to happen is you put your boss on there and then we send it to them and then they don't respond or they don't forward it. So this happens a lot less now. You all have been really good about putting yourselves down and making sure that the person who is going to respond, who's going to do the reports, etc., that's the person who we're contacting, and that's the person who's going to be our primary Perkins contact, because we do keep track of all these names in the spreadsheet. So let's see. So you also have to put the number of students served on the application cover page. This is the total number of students served through Perkins dollars in fiscal year 21. And if you're unsure or just need a little refresher about how to find that number, the information is available in the guidelines document that I sent out yesterday. It's also posted on the ICCB CTE website. So I should have said at the beginning, for those of you who are new, every year we send out a Perkins guidelines document, and really everything that's in this presentation is covered in that guidelines document, but just in a little bit more detail. So that's a really good example. So how do you find the number of students served? It gives you several different examples of how you can find that number. And then your allocation. So as most of you know, for our federal Perkins funding, the Board of Education is our pass-through entity. And so the money doesn't come directly to us. So it goes to ISB first. They determine the allocation, and then they send that to us, and then we have to run the formula. So we do, ISB does have the allocation amounts from the federal government. We are just waiting for them to send them to us. So I'm hoping that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we can get you your actual allocation amount. But for now, I would just try to plan as best you can around your fiscal year 2021 allocation amount, not 2020, this says 2020, but as I said earlier, my internet went out and I was just going through briefly, trying to fix up the presentation a little bit, and I was unable to save it to our shared drive. So whenever we do send out the presentation, we'll make sure it's the updated one, okay? And then again, if there's any changes to the Perkins contact throughout the year, please let us know. And you all have been really, really good about that the last several years. So we really want to say thank you. We appreciate that because it makes our lives a lot easier. All righty. And this is just a snapshot of what the application cover page looks like. Again, same as years past. Okay, so the performance data analysis. So this is really the only new part of this year's application process. So according to Perkins 5, you are required to disaggregate your data by student populations, special populations as defined by Perkins, and each core indicator. And when we say core indicator, we mean 1P1, 2P1, and 3P1, according to CTE programs of study, or career cluster. So we're so grateful to have Jay Brooks on the line in a little bit, and he'll be giving a presentation about how to access that data and give you some more information about that. And so all that data that you gather will go into the table on the next slide, and it shows the, actually, Anne, if you want to go ahead and flip to the next slide so we can show them. There we go. Thank you. So on the left, you have your performance indicators, 1P1, 2P1, and 3P1. And then it's broken out by fiscal year. So fiscal year 21, 22, 23, and 24. So for this year, you will be completing the columns under fiscal year 2021. So yes, although we're going into fiscal year 2022, we obviously don't have that data because we can't look into our magic crystal balls and know what that data is going to be. So what you will do is determine your, can you go back to the slide before that? Yep, one more slide back. Perfect, thank you. So what you will do is after you disaggregate your data, you will determine your ALP or actual level of performance and determine how that measures up against the SDLP, which stands for the state determined level of performance, okay? So let's see, Ian, if you want to flip back to the table, sorry. Okay, so next to the ALP column, you'll see a plus or minus sign. So if you are, quote, in the red, that means that your institution is not meeting the state determined level of performance, and therefore you will be required to create a performance improvement activity for that core indicator. So for 1P1, if you are below that 69% that the state has determined is the average of what institutions should be performing at for 1P1, you will have to create a performance improvement activity. And that leads us to the next slide. Okay, so your performance improvement plan, or PIP, looks very similar to years past, as other documents do. So it has 4 different columns. The first column is where you will specify which core indicator of performance you are writing your activity for. So 1P1, 2P1, or 3P1. You are required to create at least one activity for each of those underperforming indicators. So if you are below the state determined level of performance for 1P1, 2P1, and 3P1, you will be required to create at least one activity for each of those for each of those core indicators of performance. So you can create more than one activity if you want, but the minimum is one activity. So when you're writing your activity, make sure that you are identifying the specific subpopulations or special population or demographic that's really bringing that number down, right? So when you're looking at your data and you determine there's a specific population that's really bringing that number down, make sure you identify that that's the subpopulation that you are addressing when you're writing that activity. All of these activities must be included within the annual work plan. I know this says program narrative, that's not right. Annual work plan is what it's been called now the last couple of years. So, and we'll go over that a little bit more later. That third column is the resources column, and that's where you'll note the specific amount of Perkins resources that will be used for that activity. If you're not using Perkins resources, that's fine. Just note whatever funding source you're using, institutional funds, whatever it may be. And then the last column is the expected outcomes column, and that seems to be where folks have the most trouble, and it's definitely we've put a concerted effort in trying to help make the outcomes a little bit better, a little bit more measurable. So I think the best way to think about it is, okay, so I'm writing this activity, and at the very basic level, what do I want to get out of this activity? How am I going to make sure this activity is effective? So if you write an activity out and you're like, oh, it's a great activity, and you go to write your outcome and you're like, well, how am I going to measure the effectiveness of that activity? Is this targeting the specific population that's really bringing my number down? If it's not, then maybe you should rework that activity. The outcome is really to make sure that that activity that you're writing is actually going to make measurable change at your institution. Otherwise, how are you writing this activity to try to move the needle? Because it's not going to move the needle. Does that make sense? I know you can't respond, but I will hope that makes sense. Okay. Yep. So this is what the performance improvement plan looks like. Again, same as in years past. All right, next slide, please. Okay. So the annual work plan. Let's see, the annual work plan. It's been called a number of things throughout the years, and the format's been a little bit different. So was it program narrative one year? Used to be like Form 3 or Form 4. It's now the annual work plan. It looks a little bit different, but it's the same as last year. So if you remember, the annual work plan is where you write those specific activities that will, excuse me, that will inform your annual objectives and your long-term goals, right? So it follows exactly the format of the application narrative. So if you remember when you were doing the application narrative last year, it's broken out into, I can't remember, either 6 or 7 components. So for example, that first component is work-based learning. So Anne, if you want to flip to the next slide so we can show them. Here we go. Okay, so under work-based learning, at the very top, it says annual objectives. So last year when you were writing all your annual objectives and your long-term goals in your application narrative, obviously you had to select an annual objective for each of the fiscal years. So up there at the top where it says FY22, that's where you'll note this was our annual objective for FY22 that we determined last year. Okay. So then directly under that, it says questions. Provide a description of the work-based learning opportunities that the college will offer CTE students. So under that activity 1 description, you'll write an activity right there that is going to address that question. Now you can create more than one activity, that's perfectly fine, but you're just required to do one activity. Okay, so the next part of that is how will this activity ensure the attainment of each objective? After that is how will this activity contribute to the college's long-term CTE goals? So again, those long-term goals are the goals that you identified in your application narrative, excuse me, last year. Underneath that is where you can note if this activity was noted in the performance improvement plan. If you remember, all of those activities in your performance improvement plan have to be listed somewhere within your annual work plan. And then at the very bottom is sort of a, expected outcomes question. How do you plan to determine the effectiveness of this activity? How are you going to make sure that this activity is actually addressing those annual objectives, actually informing those long-term goals? All righty, next slide. Moving right along. Okay, so the next part of your application is the acknowledgement of grant processes document. So this document really came about because, we try our best to keep everybody informed of dates and deadlines and all those types of things. But we thought, without fail, we always get questions and we want to make sure we answer those questions on time so people can submit things on time, etc. So we thought this would be a good way to put all of those dates, deadlines, requirements, all those types of things in one document. So it's handy for you. You can go through it and say, oh, when's the budget mod due again? Or when's the last day to submit payment requests? All that information is right there for you to utilize. So that way you have it all at your fingertips when the reporting deadlines are, etc. So it's essentially, like I said, an agreement between the ICCB and the college that the Perkins administrator has read and understood the following grant deadlines and procedures, right? So after every line, there is a box that says acknowledged and understood. Please just check that box so we know that you have read that, you understand it, you don't have any questions about it. And then at the end of the form, you are required to sign it just so you know that you're also responsible at your institution for communicating those deadlines and that specific information to other pertinent individuals, like, for example, your grant fiscal contact. All righty, next slide. And this is just the very beginning part of the grant processes document. As you can see, it has, under reporting, it has acknowledged and understood. You just check that little box and then sign it and save it and send it to us. Or I'm sorry, upload it to the amplifund system. Okay, programs of study, everybody's favorite topic. Okay. So we'll start with the programs of study section with our Perkins 5 definition of a program of study. And that's defined as a coordinated, non-duplicative sequence of academic and technical content at the secondary and post-secondary level that incorporates challenging state academic standards, addresses both academic and technical knowledge and skills, including employability skills, aligns with the needs of industries and the economy of the state, region, or local area, progresses in specificity beginning with all aspects of an industry or career cluster and leading to more occupational specific instruction, includes those multiple entry and exit points that incorporate credentialing, and finally culminates in the attainment of a recognized post-secondary credential. All righty, next slide. So I hope most of you, if not all of you, have been participating in the programs of study approval cohort. I hope you're finding that helpful, and you're really able to utilize that information as you're navigating through this new programs of study approval process. So for fiscal year 22, we're asking that you provide to us a description of your FY22 program of study focus that you do plan to submit to the ICCB for approval. So within that description, we ask that you address all 6 requirements of a program of study, identifying what currently exists and what needs to be created or implemented. We ask that you tell us how the CLNA, or your Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, informed the selection of your program of study, and then also how it informed how this program of study will be aligned to the local and regional labor market. We ask that you provide specific information to us regarding how the program of study will fit into a career pathway, and then also include if the program of study includes an industry recognized credential. So the second part of that narrative will be to provide to us a list of any programs of study that you plan to submit to us for the ICCB for approval that aren't necessarily your program of study focus. So we ask that you determine a program of study focus to be created and developed this year, and then any other programs of study that you're also thinking that you will submit to the ICCB for approval. All right. So the program of study inventory form. So this is a little bit different than years past. So last year we had a ton of questions about it because initially we weren't really clear and we weren't really sure what we were going to do at the outset with the programs of study stuff. So this year, you only need to submit an inventory form if you have submitted a program of study to be approved to the ICCB, and if we have approved that program of study. So I think there has only been one. And so if that's the case, that college is the only college that will need to submit in program of study inventory form. Again, only submit this program of study inventory form for programs of study that have been approved by the ICCB utilizing the program of study approval form, right? So that's that form that requires you to utilize the expectations tool, making sure that your program of study meets the state's definition of size, scope, quality, meets minimum standards and expectations, and provides to us that evidentiary support that yes, indeed, your program is a program of study. Alrighty, So, and it's going to flip to the next slide. So this is the inventory form, and it looks a little bit different, actually. So this is not updated. So again, I updated it, but was not able to save it to our shared drive. And so really the only thing that I changed was under the narrative section. So since this form is really to be utilized for approved programs of study, I removed that question about does it meet minimum expectations or quality standards? Because the answer should be yes. It has been approved by ICCB. Therefore, that means you've gone through the expectations tool and provided the necessary evidentiary support to us, again, to make it clear that, yes, this is a program of study and it has been approved by ICCB. So I did remove that question, so I'll make sure to send it the correct presentation whenever we send this out. Also, I removed question 4 of does the program of study meet the state size, scope, and quality definition? Because again, if it has been approved by ICCB, then yes, it does. But this will just be a good form for you to keep track of what programs of study you submitted to us, and also a good way for us to keep track of that. So, all righty, next slide. Perfect. Okay. So on to the uniform budget. I think we're doing really good on time here, so that's great. Okay, so the budget contains 10 different expenditure account categories. It will look the same as other years. If you just joined the call, there was a question asked earlier during the amplifund presentation. The budget will be a downloadable form. It'll be the same Excel form we've been using for several years now. I thought about, building it into amplifund, but at this time, they don't have the capability to sort of gray out some of those expenditure categories. So as you all know, there are certain things that perkins funds cannot be spent on. And at this time, we can't remove those line items. And so it'll just be easier and way less confusing if we just use the Excel version. So it'll look the same as I have in years past. Okay, so again, make sure you cross-check that budget with the annual work plan. Within the work plan, there's an estimated Perkins dollars column in that work plan for each activity. So it's a good way for you to keep track. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is just an example of that first tab in the uniform budget, personnel, salary, and wages. Under work plan activity number, that's where you identify the work plan activity number, and that's straight from the annual work plan. And then on the bottom, provide a brief narrative description of each of those activities. So really the annual work plan is where you need to provide the specific details of what these budget line items really mean. But for places like personnel and travel, it's sometimes a lot easier to provide those narrative descriptions within the budget. So, all right, next. Okay, uniform budget FAQ. So, per usual, WIOA expenses for infrastructure and shared systems costs must be listed under general administration and are therefore capped at 5% of your Perkins allocation. So you can only utilize 5% of your Perkins allocation for indirect funds. And WIOA expenses have to go under general administration or indirect and are therefore capped at 5%. Tutors can be listed under personnel or contractual and can be listed separately or as an aggregate. So please note that paraprofessional tutors should be listed separately. Faculty stipends typically fall within the contractual expenditure category. However, some colleges categorize stipends under personnel, but please check with your local business office because every institution does it a little bit differently. And then printing costs can be categorized under either general admin or supplies. All right, next. So supplies versus equipment. We always get these questions, less than we used to, now that the guidance is a little bit more clear, but we wanted to make sure to put this in here just in case. So equipment is defined as an article of tangible personal property, that has a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit acquisition cost which equals or exceeds $5,000. Items which do not fall under these guidelines are typically classified as supplies. Generally, supplies include materials which are expendable or consumed during the course of the grant year and or are under $5,000. Okay, let's see. Colleges can have a lower threshold for classifying equipment, but not a higher threshold. So what that really means is, again, check with your local business office. But at your institution could qualify, let's say, items of $2,500 or above as equipment. That's totally fine. But if your institution says, no, we classify equipment as $6,000 and above, that's not allowable. As long as it's $5,000 or below, your college can set whatever threshold for equipment it wants to, but otherwise you have to follow the federal guidelines of $5,000. Again, equipment purchases should be detailed in the equipment narrative, otherwise future ITCB approval might be needed. Alrighty. Travel. So all travel should be detailed in the travel tab, including out-of-state travel. So out-of-state travel requires additional details. If these details are not available at the time of the plan submission, the college will be required to complete an out-of-state travel request form. And I think I go into that in a couple of slides here. Perkins 5 does include more flexibility pertaining to local uses of funds to assist CTE student organizations, or CTSOs. Perkins funds can be used to support CTSOs, and it specifies that such funds can be used for student preparation and participation in technical skills competitions aligned with CTE program standards and curriculum. So costs associated with this that might be supported can include conference and meeting expenses and travel expenses. As always, international travel is not allowable. All right, next. Okay, yep, out-of-state travel. So again, it is perfectly allowable and permissible for you to travel out of state. However, it should be either detailed within your annual work plan or your uniform budget. But if that travel cannot provide all those required specific details that we need at the time of you submitting your application, that's fine. You'll just have to submit an out-of-state travel form at some point during the fiscal year before the travel occurs. Okay, that's very important. So please do not submit to us an out-of-state travel form for a conference that happened 2 months prior, because what's the point of submitting that travel form, first of all? Second of all, if that travel for some reason happens to be unallowable, say maybe the person traveling isn't specific to CTE or they're not bringing anything back that's specific to CTE, we might not approve that travel. And so your institution would then be liable for those funds. So just please make sure that you're planning ahead as much as possible and sending those out-of-state travel request forms to us ahead of time. All righty, next. Oh, there's just the request form. Looks the same as always. And finally, just some additional compliance with WIOA. So at a minimum, Perkins grantees are required to provide access to information about programs and services at the one-stop center through direct linkage. You do not have to have someone on site at the one-stop center, but you do have to provide that information at least through direct linkage. And then underneath there gives the definition for direct linkage, which I'm not going to read that whole thing. All righty, I think that, yep, that brings us to the data portion. Jay, are you on the line by chance? If not, we can answer. I saw a couple of questions pop up in the chat, so.
Yeah, Tasha, I don't see Jay at the moment unless he called in, but we do have a handful of questions that came through.
Sure, yep.
So in this first one, I'm not sure if you can answer at the moment, but regarding the distribution of funds, are we staying with the 60% secondary, 40% community college distribution?
Yes. At this time, we're still following the 60-40 rule that is laid out in our MOU with ISB. Yes.
Okay, great. And then one individual says that they are still in the process of discussing how to collect special populations data. If we don't have this yet by May, what are the implications for our grant application?
So I'm not sure if this individual is speaking to all special populations. I would assume, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they're specifically talking about those new special populations, the new ones that were identified under Perkins 5, because obviously the other ones haven't changed from Perkins 4, so those should be pros at collecting data on those. But for the new special populations, I really don't have a good answer for you other than please try your best. I know this past year was a terrible year in general, but also for collecting information on new special populations that we've never had to collect before. So we will use grace and understanding when we're reviewing your applications, but just make sure you're noting that obviously these are areas that you need to improve upon, and to really start to take steps to try to gather that information for the future. So obviously, we're not going to deny you funding because as community colleges offering CG programs, you're all eligible for funding and will receive those formula allocations regardless. But again, just make sure you're doing your due diligence and really trying your best to gather that information.
Okay, thank you. And then will the amplifund system be used for budget modifications and payment requests?
So that's a great question about payment requests. I believe so, but I'll have to double check on that. As far as budget modifications, no. Budget modifications will utilize the same process since we're still using that Excel budget template. So budget modifications will follow the same process as it has in the past. And Anne and Janelle will talk about that in a little bit.
Wonderful. And then just a couple more questions. Is there a form for them to use to list the programs of study that they are planning on submitting for approval in the upcoming year?
No, there's no form. It's just, I don't want to say willy-nilly, but just a very brief, just narrative form. You can just list them out. It doesn't have to be super detailed. We don't need a ton of information. So there is no form, just provided in whatever form you see fit. We do have that question within the program narrative section, or the programs of study narrative section, excuse me, for that portion of the application. So that question is in there, so you'll know where to put it, but it can just be provided in whatever form you want, format you want.
Perfect. And then I would imagine the slides from today will be shared out as a resource.
Yes, we will be providing the recording of this whole presentation. And then as Brittany said, we will, ITSPS will sort of cut out the amplifund presentation. So if you have someone at your institution who just wants to hear that, we'll be providing that as a separate presentation as well. And then yes, of course, we will be sending out these presentation slides.
Okay, that's all the questions I see coming through.
Awesome. Jay, are you on? And if not, no big deal. We can skip over the data section for now. and then go right into, let's see what's next, the monitoring and grant administration slide. So whenever Jay gets on, you can just interrupt us, and then we'll get started on the data portion. But for now, just for the sake of time, we'll just go right ahead and go right into monitoring and grant administration.
Okay, and I think monitoring was me, so we'll get started. As many of you noticed this year, we had updated monitoring procedures. So we utilized a risk-based assessment, and that assessment determined your risk designation. Risk was based on both fiscal and programmatic factors, including the number of material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the grantee's most recent audit, the number of conditions assessed in the most recent internal controls questionnaire, the timeliness of required submissions, and this includes performance, programmatic, financial, and final reports, the number of findings in previous grant monitoring review, the amount of grant funding, and also the years since the last monitoring visit, and that was including both programmatic and fiscal monitoring. So the reason for the risk-based system is that it ensures that the monitoring process or all grantees are monitored uniformly across all of the ICC funded programs. And it also ensures, efficiency of everyone's time and effort. Grantees are notified of their risk level and subsequent monitoring at the beginning of each calendar year. So there were two levels, so to speak, the first being elevated risk, and that is if the grantee's institutional risk score was in the top 20% of all grantees. So those designated as elevated risk received on-site visits or desk audits from our fiscal and program staff for review of all grants awarded by the ICCB during the applicable monitoring period. But with, recent COVID and pandemic, all on-site visits are no longer taking place on-site and are carried out through an enhanced desk review process, and that culminates in a video conference. And that, that will be the process until further notice. The other option is targeted technical assistance. And that is where grantees receive targeted technical assistance through a desk review or a phone conference as it relates to all the grants awarded by the ICCB. There's no longer a moderate or low risk level. Elevated risk grantees are required to complete the self-assessment portion of the monitoring tool and also submit specific documentation to the documentation checklist. And then you receive a joint fiscal monitoring report. And all of those forms are emailed to you about 30 to 45 days before your visit, so you have time to complete. Targeted technical assistance grantees receive targeted technical assistance to discuss your previous fiscal year's grants, as well as any questions or concerns that you have regarding your current year's grants. If you receive targeted technical assistance, you do not receive a formal monitoring report. And just as a note, elevated risk monitoring closely mirrors the previous monitoring process in terms of requested documentation and review procedures. So what grants will be monitored? The risk-based monitoring system applies to all grants you receive through the ICCB. So your CTE liaison is monitoring your previous year's Perkins basic grant, as well as any Perkins Title I leadership grants that your institution received. A side note, if the Perkins administrator is not the contact for a specific leadership grant, then the applicable person will be contacted as well. All Title I leadership grants will be monitored in accordance with their respective scope, assessment, and deliverable outcomes. Requested information could include the following: any budgetary and reporting items, any applicable performance outcomes, any required grant deliverable outcomes, and any supplemental documentation specific to the grant and or the grantee. So just to go over briefly the timeline and the process, the college, your institution, is notified of a monitoring visit approximately 1.5 months prior to the visit. When you receive the notification, you also receive the programmatic monitoring tool and the documentation checklist information. The self-assessment portion of the monitoring tool is completed and then returned to your liaison approximately 2 weeks before your scheduled visit. And that is just to allow us plenty of time to review everything that you've submitted. After reviewing the self-assessment, the applicable year's fiscal Perkins plan and other reports, there is a chance that we could ask for supplemental documentation. Supplemental documentation and information from the documentation checklist is made available during an on-site review or can be submitted prior to the visit. Next, we have an on-site visit or a desk review. On-site visits typically conducted jointly with fiscal staff. After your visit, you will receive a final monitoring report letter of finding issued within 45 business days after the conclusion of the visit. In the report, there will be an outline of all the advisory recommendations and any compliance findings. And then finally, compliance findings require the college to submit a corrective action plan within a specified amount of time.
Okay, so as far as the application submission process, I'm going to talk through the timeline and important dates. First, the application is due on May 14th, 2021. The local application must be submitted by 11:30 p.m., as Tasha stated, through the amplifund grant management system. After the application is submitted, a confirmation email will be sent to the Perkins contact by May 18th. Next, risk assessments are due by May 30th, and this includes the internal controls questionnaire and the programmatic risk assessment. On July 1st, ICCB will approve the application and budget as long as there are no major revisions, any incomplete sections, or any unallowable expenditures. It's important to note that colleges cannot begin to expend funds until the college receives approval of their submitted application and then also that expenditures shall not begin before July 1st. And then finally, we really want to stress again that the extensions will not be allowed for the fiscal year 2022 application submissions. The amplifund system doesn't allow for late submissions. So please just make sure you make a note, mark your calendar, set an alarm, whatever you need to do to make sure that the application is submitted by 11:30 p.m. before the portal's closed. Then next, for reporting requirements. Per Education Department General Administration Regulations, or EDGAR as we like to say, grant recipients are required to submit quarterly reports. So the report template for the quarterly reports is part of the annual work plan. Reports are due 30 days after the end of each quarter. So we have the schedule here in the slide. Quarter 1 is due October 30th, quarter 2 is due January 30th, quarter 3 is due April 30th, and quarter 4 is due July 30th. The reports need to be submitted to the email address here on the slide, iccb.cte@illinois.gov. And then additionally, a fiscal expenditure closeout report is due 60 calendar days after the end of the grant period. And so this is going to be due on August 30th, 2022, and the reporting template for that will be released closer to time. Then finally, budget modifications. So budget modifications must be submitted if a project needs to make major adjustments or if the modification is greater than 10% or $1,000, whichever is higher, of any specific line. Budget modifications for this fiscal year will be accepted no later than May 30th, 2022. To request the budget modification, colleges must submit the budget modification request form, which is the last tab of the uniform budget spreadsheet. That form needs to be filled out completely, and make sure you include the institution name and then the date submitted fields at the top of the form, because those are very easy to overlook. Then additionally, you must submit a revised uniform budget that specifically highlights the revised areas within each tab that's being modified. And then lastly, the certification portion towards the bottom of the form must be completed and signed. Also, please note that budget modifications must be submitted and approved prior to any expenditure of funds, and modifications submitted after an expenditure of funds has occurred will not be approved retroactively.
Okay, so we did have a few questions coming in. Let's see, just to confirm, we do not have to resubmit the narrative for FY21-24 unless we have changes to wording or goals. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I was actually just typing out a response to that, but it's easier for me to say it anyway. Yes. So you are not required to resubmit your application narrative this year unless you want to make minimal changes. Now, I mean minimal. Please don't redo the entire thing because that takes away from the long-term planning that we were really trying to hammer home last year. So you can make minimal changes to wording, goals, etc. Also, you in your feedback from your fiscal year 2021 grant application submissions, you may have been told by your Perkins liaison that you might need to resubmit your application narrative, maybe just specific parts of it, or maybe if you needed to maybe rework your annual objectives a little bit. So if that's the case, then yes, you will have to submit your application narrative. But otherwise, and if you're not sure, please check with your Perkins liaison or go back to that feedback that you received last year. Otherwise, no, you are not required to submit that. And again, that will just be a supplemental document sent to us. I'm not going to upload the application narrative to amplifund because that will just be confusing.
Okay. And so if they submit a grant in amplifund early, let's say May 5th, for example, would they receive any confirmation of submission, or are confirmations only sent May 18th?
We can try our best to, continuously be checking that. But it's not going to be something that's checked on a daily basis. So if you are concerned about it, you can reach out to your liaison and we can go in there, make sure we can download the forms, and then we can send you an approval earlier than May 18th.
Okay, and then is May 30th the budget modification deadline for this current year, FY21 as well?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that is all the questions at this time.
Jay, are you on the line? Okay, I don't think Jay's been able to join us yet. So if that's all the questions we have right now, Amy and Brittany, do you want to go ahead with your portion of the presentation? Is that okay? And then whenever you're done with that, we can go to Jay. You might
Absolutely.
be having trouble logging in, or maybe his internet's not working either. Who knows?
Absolutely. Happy to jump in.
Thank you.
So can I go ahead and share my screen? Just real
You
quick.
should be able to, yeah.
Okay. Hang on one second.
So Anne, I think you might need to stop sharing your screen
Okay.
because it won't allow multiple people to share.
Sorry. Yep, that's the issue. Thank you.
Okay, I'm trying to do that now.
Oh,
Did it work?
no, I think I just killed you.
Oh.
Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that, Anne.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and hope it is a bright, sunshiny St. Patrick's Day where you're at. If you're in Central Illinois, you're seeing the rain as I am here. My name is Amy Julian, and I'm the director for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. And joining me here this afternoon is Brittany Boston. And Brittany, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. I am Brittany Boston, and I am the Associate Director for Equity and Outreach at the Center.
So what we are here today to talk about is basically what we have coming up. The Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support provides technical assistance, professional development, and product development for the Community College Board CTE programs. And we are just going to do a nice little update on upcoming professional development. We're going to go a little bit into our tips training, and then we're also going to have some resources for you to check out. So as we get started, I'm going to have Brittany walk through our upcoming professional development.
Yeah, so this is a couple of things that we have to close out the current fiscal year. Obviously, we'll be planning and discussing some things for the upcoming fiscal year. But as you can see, a lot of times we send out things on our listserv through our newsletter. If you are not connected to that and would like to be, please let us know and we can get you signed up on that listserv as well. But you can always go to our website, which I believe the link will be shared in a slide later, or I can put it in the chat here in a moment. And then if you scroll down, we have this conferences and events portion that always has all of our upcoming professional development, whether it is CTE or Perkins related or WIOA related, any of the professional development that we have that is open to the public, we post there. And so next week, we have Kirsten Bayer, who is a member of our team and is also an instructor at Richland. And she will be sharing some teaching tips for online instruction and engagement. And that will be taking place on Wednesday at 1 p.m. And we will share these slides out as well so you can access that registration link. And then in April, Amy and myself will be sharing ways to identify and address hidden bias on your campus and the impact that that can have on not only relationships between faculty and staff, but students, and just the overall way some of that hidden bias can really affect the environment of a classroom and a campus. And again, that registration link will be there. And then we are in the planning process for the Forum for Excellence. So please feel free to save the date for the 23rd and the 24th. We are in discussions. We are hoping that it can be in person, but again, we have to, see what September looks like for 2021, and are looking at possibly incorporating some virtual components as well. And so more information will be coming regarding the Forum for Excellence later on in the year. And then some of our resources that we have, you can see I highlighted specifically the CTE tab because that is where you will find the advisory guidebook. That is really a resource to help guide you in implementing that advisory committee, getting it started, some of the conversations that you can be having and ways to utilize those advisory committees. You'll also find all of our resources for special populations, as well as those lovely super strategies documents and the webinar series that we had over the past, how long did we stretch that out for? The past 6 months of the special population super strategies. The CTE success stories we compiled with ICCB, worked with them to compile some CTE student success stories. And so that document is shared, as well as a template if you are interested in either creating your own success stories and using that template to promote programs within your community, or if you'd like to submit them to ICCB. We do hope to continue that sort of compendium and continue to grow those CTE success stories as well. And then you can also jump around our website. We have an equity tab, recruitment tab, which has information on recruitment strategies. We owe a transitions academy. We have a lot of resources, whether it's on universal design for learning or marketing strategies, how to implement social media when marketing and engaging your students. We have quite a bit of information on there. So in all of your free time that I'm sure all of you have, please feel free to explore and jump around, or send me an email with any questions you may have regarding any of the resources or previous webinars that we have provided.
So yes, before we leave this particular slide, I want to say two things. One, if there is professional development around special population support that you are really anxious to hear about, I need to know more about how to support homeless, or can I find something on single parents, reach out to us and let us know, and we are happy to support you in finding that or developing that professional development. We kind of pride ourselves as being the special pops experts for the state. In addition to that, if there is something that you hear that we mention and you can't find, we really want our website to be intuitive, but if you say UDL videos, I'm not really sure where I would find that, let us know and we'll send you those UDL videos and resources. We have both taken classes with CAST and are also partnering with other entities in the state around universal design for learning and how that can really impact and improve your classroom instruction. So now we're going to move on to something that we're excited to tell you all about. And you might have heard about it because we have been kind of on a little roadshow with our training on instructional practices for post-secondary success. So this is TIPS. And what TIPS is, or let's talk a little bit about the history and purpose of the TIPS modules. So the TIPS modules is really that idea of an online platform that is a collaboration between ICSPS and ICCB. It is pedagogical support for post-secondary CTE instructors. And the way we've designed it is that it can be a standalone training for your career and tech ed faculty, or it can be a supplement to your professional development programs. So if you have something robust at your college already and you're looking for a little bit more infusion on pedagogy for your CTE instructors, we can help you with that. If you have kind of a framework but aren't really sure, we can help you with that as well. I do want to let you know that we are in the pilot phase right now. We're in the first pilot, and then we're going to have a comment period, and then we will be launching fully. So those of you who are engaged in the pilot, those colleges, there's about 8 of you. Thank you so much for being willing to share your faculty and resources and speak with us about the pilot. And those of you who are interested after today, reach out to me and Brittany, and we can let you know how you can be involved. I do want to move next. And I'm having this little pause because I don't remember if I clicked that this will work. But I want to share the video on TIPS real quick so we can kind of see the overview. And Brittany, let me know if the sound plays on this. Are you all hearing that?
No, I was just going to say, if you're trying to play it now, we cannot hear it or see it.
Let me take over the share again. It's a lovely thing with Zoom. Little tech tip for everybody. When you go to share, and if you have a video, which I was all in a hurry and I didn't do, what we want you to do is click that sharing sound and optimize video clip, and then that will allow you to share the sound. So let's try this again.
Instructional Practices for Post-Secondary Success, or TIPS. This series of professional learning modules provide...
Are we good now?
Yep.
Okay, we're going to start over so everybody gets the full picture. Here we go.
Welcome to this training on instructional practices for post-secondary success, or Tips. This series of professional learning modules provides post-secondary instructors in career and technical education with an overview of evidence-based practices that strengthen the teaching and learning process. Ultimately, this leads to a better prepared workforce and greater personal fulfillment for both instructors and learners. Your role as instructor is key. Your life and teaching experiences are invaluable as you teach others how to skillfully apply content knowledge while on the job. These modules can further support you with tools for your toolbox, proven teaching practices to help you share your expertise. Since you will be building upon the teaching practices and skills you already apply, let's use a construction analogy to illustrate the module's main topics. First, you will prepare the building site and lay a strong foundation by creating student-centered conditions for learning. The creation of a learning environment that supports diverse learners and their needs can promote equity in your classroom and help to ensure that no learners are left behind. Next, you will construct a frame for your teaching by designing a core curriculum with diverse learners in mind. You will use a Universal Design for Learning, or UDL framework, to think intentionally about how to make curriculum accessible for all. Then, you will build out from that frame, applying engaging instructional practices that make your course inviting and functional for learners. This includes classroom strategies to keep students engaged and increase both the rigor and relevance of their learning. Last, you will use a balanced approach to assessment and feedback to continually gauge, adjust, customize, and improve your teaching. This constant renovation of your teaching practices will add individualized value for learners over time. This is a lot to cover, so be sure to engage in the activities at the end of each module. As they allow you to, apply what you've learned. Connect new knowledge to existing frameworks. Explore topics of interest in more depth, and reflect on how critical practices can impact your teaching. In essence, the modules can help you to build a concrete plan to continually enhance your teaching in evidence-based ways. You can get started at any time. Engage in these professional learning modules at your pace, individually or even better, with a group of peers. You are not in this alone. For much more support and access to these and other resources, visit the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at icsps.illinoisstate.edu.
So what's really exciting and important about that is all of us who have had this level of instruction really look at your coursework, and you often are like, okay, what can I do? I mean, that continuous improvement model is just really something that's always there as you're teaching. I know I've actually taught longer than I've been at ICSPS, and every semester when I come back to teaching, I'm like, okay, what do I want to change? What do I want to improve? What do I want to enhance? How do I want to make it just a little bit different? Because you and your faculty all know we do not teach a course, we teach the students within the course, and every time it's different. And so what this tip series is really going to do is allow to really embed those pedagogical structures. So a lot of times with our CTE faculty, they have the content, they have the curriculum, they know what they want to teach, but those teaching strategies, those ways in which we can reach students, those little things that we can do to embed universal design and equity aren't really their forte. So we're allowing this module and these modules to allow and enhance that instruction. So that's really where we're coming from. This is going to be on what we like to call Equity U. It is an online learning management system that ICSPS has. And what it is really a learning management system. So the curriculum will be posted out there. You'll be able to go through. It'll be self-guided. But the way we're rolling the pilot out is to really see how this curriculum is best digested. So is it something that can be self-guided? Is it something that needs a little face-to-face PD? Is it something, and by face-to-face, I do mean on Zoom, because yes, I'm aware there's a pandemic, or is it something that is a standalone? And I think what we're envisioning is this being a little bit of everything, that it is something that if, for example, Parkland wants to use as an independent, take it and pluck it and put it into their system, it's going to be awesome for that. But if, for example, Heartland says, you know what, I really want you to walk my faculty through this, we're going to be able to do that. It's going to be fantastic. But Equity U is also where you're going to see in the upcoming years opportunities for universal design curriculum and some trauma curriculum. Those of you who participated in our trauma series on looking at trauma and how the trauma of the pandemic has impacted our students, we're putting together some trauma curriculum that will also be built out on the LMS system or on Equity U. So something to think about: what aspects of curriculum instruction and assessment require the most for post-secondary instructors? And what are those things that we can support and help with? And that's really where we're looking at. So what TIPS really looks at are conditions, curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So we create optimal conditions for learning in an equitable and effective learning environment. We are really focused on that design for accessible curriculum. If you are well versed in Perkins, and I know you all are because we've been eating, sleeping, and breathing Perkins for so long, Perkins were for the first time named Universal Design for Learning as a way to infuse equity throughout curriculum. So this is really going to help you when you've said to yourself, how do I do that? This module system will really help you see those ways in which you can infuse UDL. And it applies instructional practices that are both rigorous and relevant to increase student engagement. And then there is that balanced assessment and feedback of the system to target instruction for individual successes and really looking at ways in which we are able to engage with our students and giving some enhancement tips on how you can engage with students. So let's dive a little deeper into each of these. Conditions for learning, and I know I kind of got ahead of myself. Creating optimal learning promotes diversity and equity, learning variability and special needs, culture of humility and responsiveness, generating awareness, trauma healing and informed teaching, and how do we really encompass that in career and tech ed, and then an intentional approach to learning and supports. When we talk about curriculum design, we're talking about accessibility, centering learning standard objectives, applying universal design, engagement, representation, and action and expression. And then instructional practices, that balance between teacher and student-centered learning and facilitated teaching practices and really learner autonomy choices, and then looking at that authentic approach. And so what I want to be very clear on, because I've had some questions as we presented this around, we are not creating curriculum. We are creating curriculum enhancements. So this is about enhancing and really supporting the already very robust career and tech ed curriculum across the state. And then feedback and assessment. Use data to move learning forward, balance of assessment approach. What is that formative, interim, and summative ways in which we look at assessment? And then effective feedback for learning tools. What are some instructor learnings? What does that peer-to-peer look like? And then how can we have that self-reflection? One of the things that we've had to embrace is that idea of distance and in-person learning, and that balance as we move out of the pandemic and back into the world being shifted right side up. What is that going to look like? And so as we're rolling this out through the pilot, of course, we are not going out and sitting down with any of those colleges in an in-person format quite yet, but that is our hope, is that we'll be able to have some face-to-face professional development come fall and be able to roll this out to the rest of the system as we move forward in a lot of different modules and approaches, or means and approaches. So what are some ways to engage with TIPS with the modules? Again, it can be the individual self-paced. We could do it collaboratively with peers. We do have some colleges who brought several faculty together, and so they're working through the pilot in that way, and that is our intent as well. And then collaborating with guided facilitation, which again, that would be provided by ICSPS. Practical activities, there's application, connection, exploration, and reflection. And we really encourage the use of culminating activities for each module, and then develop a plan for action. So allowing you to practice the use immediately. Practice and use immediately. So when we go over something in the module, you'll be able to take that in, or the faculty will be able to take that into their classrooms right away. And really our overarching goal for TIPS is access and equity for well-prepared learners. So right now, there are kind of a little bit of opportunities. One, we have the pilot, which is already underway. And anybody who's like, oh my gosh, I wonder if my institution's involved, let us know and we can see about that. And then there will be comment period. But right now, we are not fully releasing the whole curriculum to the system. It's being released to the pilots. Once the pilots wrap up in about, I think that'll be done around May, we will release it to the system. And again, it is all online. So if there's something that we need to change, morph, and move forward, we will be able to do so. So I'm going to pause here for questions about all the things we just kind of threw at you guys. So what questions do you have?
Yeah, so Amy, we did have some questions coming through, one of which you addressed as to when the tips modules will be made available, and just how currently we are in that piloting phase. And then I believe over the summer, we're going to try and make some adjustments and changes based on feedback from the programs who are engaging in the pilot, and then hopefully get that released to the field and all of the programs around fall.
And so one of the things we've kind of been struggling with is summer a good time to train faculty or to open this up to faculty? So by summer, I mean more like July-ish, because that would align with our timeline more. And I'd love to hear from you all as to that thought of, is summer a good time to try to engage with faculty? And yes, it would be full-time and part-time faculty. So I have been, and you guys as the collective state, I've done a lot of professional development for CT faculty or gone to institutions and done with their adjunct faculty or their full-time faculty. This is designed for both. This is going to be, first of all, it's going to be free. Dun, dun, dun. It's going to be open to whoever really wants to access it, and will be supported by both ICCB and ICSPS.
And then we did have a question as to whether the content would be appropriate for veteran instructors who are already well-versed in building curriculum.
Yes, I think it would be. Personally, I've taught for, what year is it? Since 2002. I've been an adjunct professor at Illinois State University, and the more I get engaged with universal design, the more I see fun tips and tricks that I could use. So for a veteran faculty who has their curriculum built out, again, we're not going to be providing instruction on how to develop curriculum. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at how to enhance instruction. So what are some tips? What are some exercises that you can do? What are tips around making sure your curriculum is accessible? So even for that veteran teacher, what are things? Is your syllabus posted ahead of time? Are you providing proper accommodations? Are you making things accessible? So really bringing them into that idea of full accessibility, which is what Perkins is pushing us to do. So yes, I think it would be very applicable for someone who's a veteran teacher.
Okay, and then we had a question specifically on the modules, how long those would take, how many modules there are, and the names of each of the modules. I know for, and Amy, feel free to jump in at any time, the length of the modules is really up to how you implement the system. If it is a self-pay system where you give your instructors access and they move in and out of the modules when they have the time to do so, or if it's something that you are presenting in sort of more of a group professional development environment where you walk through them with a group of instructors, it really is kind of how you choose to implement the modules within your existing professional development and within your system.
Yes, and they are going to be chunked out. They will not be one 22-hour module. It will be in digested parts, or is in digested parts. So is there a component where the syllabus can be reviewed or lesson plans are reviewed and given feedback? If the institution wants that, yes, because there are individuals who are willing to do that, and myself included. And then Shanna Shipman is our, Brittany, please help me with her title.
Oh, you put me on the spot. Program enrichment consultant.
There you go. And so yes, to answer that question about is there a component where the syllabus can be reviewed? Yes, if they want to do that, if the faculty is willing to share their syllabus, we're absolutely wonderful. and we'd be happy to give pointers. Again, I'm not going to tell anyone how to teach their class, but there are some wonderful ways in which to embed universal design that some are common practice and some are like, oh, that's a very easy thing to do. I don't know why I haven't been doing that. See what I'm saying? So I want to be sure that all of those exciting things can be there because they're so beneficial to our students. So I'm hearing faculty's not the best time. Faculty aren't under contract. That's kind of what I was thinking. The question of, is it something that can be shared with or work with your dual credit high school instructors? Absolutely. But I do want to make sure it is very clear, and I'm going to back up here so you see the title again. We are intentional that this was developed specifically for post-secondary. So if they teach dual credit, that's absolutely appropriate. Are we? Oh, sorry. There. If we, but it is training instruction practices for post-secondary success, and it was designed in coordination with the community college board, and it was designed for college level coursework. So we have not, we're not closing it off to anyone, but yes, it's designed for post-secondary. So I think the dual credit instructors would be a fantastic audience.
Okay, and I think.
I was going to say, you and I are both looking at them. I don't know if we've covered a.
Yeah, I think that's all of them. Again, just a lot of comments about how summer may not be the best time for faculty.
So I'm going to throw our emails up there. Again, if you have any questions or are interested or would like to be a part of this or learn more about this, let us know. As I said, the first pilot's underway, but there is going to be a comment period, and we are going to release that curriculum and let you all, we want to roll it out correctly. We want to roll it out with pilot studies and then embed whatever or make whatever changes the pilot recommends and then roll it out to the system. So we just want to be sure that we have as polished as possible by the time you see it. But if you have any questions, we are happy to share those out or happy to address those. Any other questions? And I'll stop sharing so you can take that back over.
Okay.
And I will post both my email and Brittany's email in the chat there. But thank you for the opportunity to present. And Tasha, thank you very much.
Sorry, Amy.
No, you're great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amy and Brittany, for presenting that awesome information. I'm so excited to see the tips modules roll out, and I hope they're successful and they're usable, and I know they will be. So at this time, we're going to turn it over to Jay Brooks. He's our Senior Director for Research and Policy Studies at the ICCB to talk to you about data.
Oh, Jay, we're not able to hear you. Are you able to select your microphone under the little microphone icon?
So Jay, yeah, if you click your microphone, there's a little up arrow there, and then you can pick which microphone you're using, because it appears that you're not muted, but you're apparently not using the microphones that's in your ears. And I know Jay was just on GoToMeeting, so I know sometimes moving from GoToMeeting on to Zoom is always fun.
No, it's a headache, yes.
Oh, it's connecting, so.
And I feel very out of place giving tech support to Jay Brooks, I just want to say.
The world is upside down, Brittany, it's okay.
It is.
All right, Jay, you're now muted, but it does show you're connected.
All right, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
we can.
All right, so after the 10,000th time, you would think that I would have this down to a science, but I was trying to call in on my phone there, and apparently it wasn't coming through. So anyway, I'm on the old school computer audio, so hopefully we don't have any delays there. Sorry for the little hiccup. Can I share my screen, Brittany?
Yes, you should be able to.
Sharing, then I can share it because the screen that we have, maybe I can provide something that's a little bit bigger to look at here. And
Okay.
You want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, and you'll have to stop sharing your screen.
There we
There
go.
you go.
Okay. And I am going to move over to share now. All right. So now you guys should be seeing my screen. And good afternoon, everyone, by the way, here. Sorry again for the little hiccup. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to provide you guys with a little bit of an update in terms of data and data reporting, especially to the consolidated annual report, and some things that we kind of found out as we went through this cycle of reporting data to the feds. So back, gosh, I don't know, it's, I guess, March of last year before everything sort of came unraveled. I think that's the last time, or maybe it was a little before that, where we provided you guys with some resources, kind of a flow chart of how folks move through the Perkins measures and how they are counted in Perkins, and then some things in terms of like timelines for reporting. And as we went through the cycle and we started reporting for Perkins 5, there's some things that we had to update. So we wanted to spend just a little bit of time and kind of provide you with a bit of an update. So for those of you who were at that last administrators meeting that was in person in Springfield, we provided you with this sort of flow chart. Now, if you've seen this before, it's by and large exactly the way it was, with a couple of important caveats that I want to kind of distinguish for you today. If you've never seen it before, we'll make sure that after the session today that you have this handout as a reference guide. What we wanted to do was we basically wanted to say, okay, here's how we check, first of all, to see if an individual is eligible for Perkins 5 reporting, and sort of outline for you how an individual moves, first how they become eligible, and then how they move through the different measures. And also I'll kind of share with you a little bit of a couple of other guides or resources that kind of shows what we're tracking, when we're tracking it, where we're getting that data from. I know sometimes in conversations I've had with Perkins folks, they say, you know what, the data really doesn't represent my program, or it's missing some information. So what we wanted to do was to provide you guys with a tool that would allow you to have conversations with your data folks at your colleges and be able to say, they're pulling this information from this item. Do we have good coverage, or are we reporting this information on all of our students? Because we can only pull, what is submitted by the colleges. And so if there's a disconnect there, we want to make sure that you guys know how to have that conversation with your IR folks so that you can do that. So and sort of just walking you through kind of quickly here, and as I said, this guide would be available to everyone, the updated version of it. The primary difference when we check for eligibility for Perkins is we look according to Perkins guidelines, we've got to look to see if the individual had earned, not enrolled, but earned 12 CTE hours in a program year. And if that didn't happen, but they finished a short-term certificate at the college that was less than 12 hours, those individuals are going to go into the denominator. And so the one thing, as we got to looking at that, we thought, well, we can just go, we have in, you guys may not be completely familiar with all of the data that your colleges are submitting to ICCB on an annual basis, but we receive both a student level file and what we call a course level file. And that course outlines every single course that a student has enrolled in during the course of an academic year. And so our initial thought was, well, we can just go to that particular submission and pull everyone who has CTE hours, 12 or greater, and some other things. But the one thing that we sort of had to take a look at is how colleges were reporting declared majors or programs of study for students in relation to those hours that they had. Because what we found was, in some of our initial submission, we had individuals who had a significant number of CTE hours, but their declared major was in an unrelated field. It wasn't a CTE major. It wasn't a CTE program of study. So one of the things that we refined is we're still looking at that AC to make sure that they earn 12 CTE hours in the academic year, but we're pairing that with their declared major, the program of study that they're in, to make sure that's also a CTE program. And then if they did that, that individual goes into the denominator that we begin to check for all these follow-up measures. The other piece of that is there are instances where an individual may not have earned 12 credit hours in an academic year, but maybe what they did was they were in a really short-term certificate program that was CTE related, and without earning 12 hours, they were able to complete a certificate. And if that occurred, we also pull that individual into the denominator. So that's basically how we're getting at the denominator for an academic year. And if an individual meets those conditions, what happens then is that's when they go into the concentrator cohort. So basically that's how we arrive at a concentrator. And one thing in this document, I want to, even if you're not familiar with it, we've put together, I'm just going to kind of flip over to this secondary page here so you can see, but all of our data is coming from the submissions, as I kind of indicated before there, that the colleges give us, and certain things in terms of the special populations and subgroups. We've provided a page that tells you what source we're pulling that from. So like, for example, if you see that maybe single parent at your institution is being significantly underreported, you can then come in here and you can see when you talk to your IR folks, what we're pulling from. The IR folks will notice we're just pulling from item 84 of the A1 submission, and that's how we know whether or not the individual is identified as a special population. But what we thought was that providing this kind of context that tells you exactly what item is so that when you're having that conversation with your IR staff, you can specifically point to this submission, this item, and they'll know exactly what you're talking about. And then you can do some of that kind of examination locally to be able to see if in fact it's being underreported, or if there's just a disconnect. We find sometimes maybe the information that you have maybe isn't making it into the college's system where they're pulling these reports from. So we want to make sure that we can help facilitate that conversation locally. And then once we determine that you're a concentrator, which is really what this whole thing, this first sort of row here is about, is just determining if you're eligible for Perkins reporting as a concentrator. Then we move down and look at the non-traditional enrollment. And here we're just looking for individuals who are in programs of study or who have SIP codes that are non-traditional for their gender. And that information, we did receive that there has been an update to that. And so we are in the new Perkins 5 information that we're running, we are using that new SIP kind of crosswalk, and it just outlines for every program, it outlines whether or not that SIP is considered to be non-traditional for that gender. And that's how we come up with, here's your total number through your concentrator, or whether or not they're eligible for Perkins. And then we look at that program of study or that program they completed to identify whether or not it was a non-traditional for the gender. And if it was, that individual moves into the numerator or success for 3P1, and that's your rate. Now, I do want to point out, you kind of see up here at the top, one thing that is always kind of somewhat of an issue, and it's really just a matter of how data flows through various agencies. But when we start to get into things like 2P1 and 1P1, 2P1, we're just looking at whether or not they earned a credential at the institution in the year or the subsequent year that we pulled them into this cohort. And part of the issue that we have, especially when it comes to employment, there's always a lag between when that data is available and when IDS we can match records with the Department of Employment Security to find out whether or not the individual entered employment. And the same holds true for even like if an individual, maybe they completed a program and they continued on in other post-secondary education. There's always a bit of a lag there. But what we've created and plugged in at the top of this flow chart is sort of a date to kind of let you know when the data is available to us and then what we're tracking. And there's on this second page, the same chart is here as well. And you'll notice that in October, or technically in December of last year, what we reported for federal purposes was just the total number of participants and the total number of concentrators, which kind of gets at 3P1. We didn't actually have to report performance yet because there is that lag, and the feds know that as well. But this chart sort of outlines for you when the data is technically kind of available to us, and then what program year we're using to identify these groups to monitor and to check progress on. So that's all contained within that within this document that outlines where all the special populations and subgroups are coming from. But one other thing too, I think that's an interesting and important thing to note is we've done pods training when we used to use a system where we just provided you guys with a bunch of different spreadsheets. And sometimes there was a bit of a disconnect between understanding like, okay, you know, this measure has this many people and when do we see them over in these measures? But what is nice about this, and the kind of the color code sort of leads you to understand and see this, is that, for example, when we ran the concentrator group for fiscal year 20, which was everyone that was served in your college in FY20 that met the definition, we're going to be following up with those individuals for credential attainment and employment information in a couple of years, because we have to give that lag that I was talking about earlier. But these numbers are going to track back to this year. So if at your college you had, you know, let's say 1,000 people that was in this measure in 3P1 in October of 2020, when we get to the other two measures, and you're going to see that same 1,000 people, and we're just checking to see what happened to those 1,000 people over that kind of that 2-year time span. So you always know, you kind of have ahead of time, because one of the things that always come up is, okay, who are these individuals and how can I kind of monitor that? We know that in year one, we know who they're going to be. And so now you have, there's a way for you to be able to say, okay, we know who they are. So now we can kind of monitor over time and see how they progress, because these numbers are always going to track to what happens a couple years later. And that's where we start to check things like completions, and then as it becomes available, employment, and we are able to check to see if they were successfully employed a couple of quarters after exiting your program. So let me stop for just a second and see. There's a lot of information. I know I'm throwing a lot at you in a relatively short amount of time, but let me just kind of stop and see if any questions have either come in from chat or anything like that that I need to address before I move on any further.
So Jay, we did have a question come through, and more just a clarification. Did I mishear, or is the declaration being added back into the process?
So the short answer to that is, by declaration, I'm assuming you mean a declared major or a program of study. And the short answer to that is yes, we are adding that back in. What is different than Perkins 4 is, with Perkins 4, we looked at student intent, like their declared intent at the point of entry. And this is actually looking at the reported major of the student, or what program of study they're in. So one thing that, and this is something that we'll have to work with colleges with, and it could be that it's just actually that it's accurate that an individual is enrolled in a non-CTE program and they don't have, you know, they've taken enough CTE hours to meet that 12-hour threshold, but they're, you know, they're not technically, they're pursuing something beyond CTE or outside of CTE. But according to our, you know, sort of our federal reporting guidelines, one of the things that we have to do is we have to sort of associate these programs with the specific career clusters and the programs of study that are attached to them. So what we found is that sometimes there's a disconnect, right? Like maybe we'll have a declared major, and the actual behavior of the student based on what we see in the AC or the course file seems to say maybe that the declared major wasn't updated properly. Maybe they actually came in and they had a declared major, and for whatever reason it was never updated in the system, because based on the number of CTE hours they have, it would seem that this truly is a CTE student. That's something we'll have to probably take a look at, and you know, we can refine and things like that. But otherwise we can't, what we can't do is have like, okay, here's this, you know, group of students, and they all have a major that's completely unrelated to CTE, and they have no cluster to report. And so, you know, that's not something that that we can do. We have to have a way to get at program of study, and we can't do it just simply through course taking activity over the course of a year. So I do see another question here. Are there may be 1.1 courses within the CTE program or certificate that you would find these in accounting or so like the AAS programs. So think about it like this. If you have an individual who is in a program of study, locally, are those programs of study being updated to reflect that's what the student's declared major is? Now, if the student's a transfer student and they are, really they aren't pursuing any kind of CTE certificate or anything like that, then that's a different issue. But if they are, if they do get some kind of a short-term certificate, even if their declared major is something else, we can count that, we can claim that, but it's only in instances where their declared major is not a CTE program of study. So, we have to be able to tie course-taking behavior to programs of study. So, looking here and see, some may be declaring majors that are greater than 16 credits to be eligible for financial aid. Some CPs are shorter in nature, hence not eligible for financial aid, with a federal minimum 16 credit hours. Yeah, I mean, that opens up several different things for discussion, but that's something that I can discuss with my CTE colleagues. But as we submitted the data and we received the feedback from federal officials, we had to somewhat tighten our definition just to make sure that we were truly getting at individuals in, as the law declares or the law states that we have to do, is that they are in a program of study that is CTE coupled with this sort of activity. So in the interest of time, I don't want to short any questions, but I do want to touch on one other thing here. So we'll get this out to everyone. I do want to just draw your attention to the third page. So the second page is just sort of the flow chart of when we're measuring and which academic year we're looking at, and then the A1 items for all the special populations that you can use to have that discussion with your IR folks. This third page is really kind of gets into the details of exactly how we're doing this. And so, like things like the denominator, they're enrolled in a CTE program and they have 12 credits earned, or they have a PCS degree of 1, 2, or 3, and these are things, it's written so that when you're having conversations with your IR folks, they know exactly what to look for. But all we're talking about here is that they are in a program of study that is CTE related. They have 12 hours of CTE activity, or they have these short-term certificates. And so all of these things that you see here, like degree, comp type, hours enrolled, that's just getting at what's in that A1. And, certainly if need be, we can, put this in more, kind of non-IR or non-data speak, but it gets at that whole idea of specifically, they've got to meet this criteria to make it into this denominator. And if you have individuals you think should be in the denominator but aren't, it's likely because of one of these conditions right here are not being met. And so, for each of these measures, we show you both the denominator and then how someone is counted as a success or in the numerator. And so, for example, I talked a little bit about the 3P1 and being enrolled in one of those non-traditional SIPs. For 2P1, we're basically taking it, as I said before, we're taking that exact same group of your 3P1 students, and we're just simply coming down and then we're measuring to see if they earned a certificate over the time period that we're allowed to look at. And if they were, then they're counted in the numerator or as a success. And then we do finally we do the last thing for employment matching. And the employment matching is the one where we have the greatest lag. So for example, when we look at individuals who complete a program, let's say by this year, let's say the 2020 or 2021, so they complete their program in May, June, and we've got to check a couple months later or a couple quarters later, 2 quarters later. Typically, there's about roughly about a 2-quarter lag between when that data is available. So that puts us out looking into like June of the next year to be able to actually get that data. By the time all employers submit their data to IDS, they claim their data and it's available for us to match. There is a significant lag. So that's why in some of these measures, you're seeing that lag. So But we will get this information out to you in terms of the this updated sheet. Those have seen it before. Most of it's the same, but I did want to specifically point out that difference. And then we can also share with you, I think I saw a question about the SIPs. We can share with you that updated SIP list that we have that we're using now to determine the non-trad rates. One thing that we did find is that by making sure that the individuals who were in the concentrator group that we're checking, when we made sure that they also had a program of study that was related to the CTE in addition to those CTE hours, that actually helped the state and programs have higher rates of completion and success in 2P1. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Obviously, if someone has a declared major in CTE and they're taking all these hours in CTE, that group is more likely to have some type of an award than maybe folks who are in some other type of declared major that may just be taking CTE hours over the course of an academic year. Because remember, the threshold is 12 hours earned over an entire academic year. So for a student who might be taking 12 hours or a semester or more, that's not a really high threshold. So, let me stop there. Any other questions, Brittany, that I need to address at this point?
Yeah, so there was one inquiring about whether they are able to see this information at the program level.
So I think there's a couple ways that we could possibly tackle this. I know with the IR folks, and I don't know, it seems in conversations with Perkins staff, sometimes there's a closer relationship at some colleges in terms of, that communication back and forth than at others. And, while what we want to try to do is to provide a way in which, no matter how closely you communicate, that you have the resources you need to have those conversations. So, one thing we've looked at is providing back to the colleges, like, okay, so for 3P1, that group that we're going to track, that we just recently ran to submit to federal officials, we give back to the college, like, okay, here's your group of those 1,000 students I was talking about, right? Here's who they are, and here's how we've identified them, and here's their specific program of study, or if they had fewer than 12 hours and didn't meet the other definition, but they had that short-term completion, here's what that short-term completion was, something like that. The second part of that we're looking at is, and we actually are kind of working with our CTE colleagues, is on some dashboards that we're going to be bringing online over the next bit that will allow us to do this kind of drilling and sort of examination at both the state level and at the college level. One of the issues that we have at the college level, especially in the subgroups, is that a lot of times we run into issues of data suppression where, on some of these subgroups where individuals perhaps are, the numbers just aren't reported very well, or you're not able to capture them very well. We have very low ends or numbers, right? And so typically what we try to do in those instances is to ensure privacy, is to suppress numbers typically below 10. But in some programs, 10 may be all of the that you had for that. So, but I think the two ways that we can tackle that is through those specific, providing the file back. And we already have mechanisms in place to do this. So this isn't something that we've been doing this for a long time, but providing specifically back your 3P1 cohort, your non-trad cohort. And then also when the dashboards come online for public consumption, it will allow you to do some of that.
Okay, thank you, Jay. And we did have one more question. So a program has been stacking shorter term CTE certificates into AA pathways. So for example, accounting clerk into an AA. If these students are enrolled in the AA but earn the CTE certificate, would they count?
Okay, so that's a great question, and it perfectly illustrates on this item right here. Okay, so let's say, for example, 2P1 is just credential attainment, right? That's all we're talking about. So based on that question, what they're saying is they don't have a program of study that's CTE. So the second part doesn't even matter, right? But what does matter in this case, so they've created this stacked sort of platform. What does matter is they're going to have a completion that's degree 1, 2, or 3, is they're just different degrees that colleges report to us. But in short, just think of it like this. The colleges are going to report to us a degree that is CTE. And that CTE, as long as it's These 18, 30, 35, or 40, all that is just a short-term certificate. So if you have, in this example, if you have some type of short-term certificate that you've embedded in that an individual can earn on their way to that AA, we would capture that through this right here, right? Because that's a short-term certificate, it's CTE. Even though the person is not a CTE in a CTE program of study, that's still going to count as both the denominator and as a success because that individual earned that certificate. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Any others, Brittany?
No, that is all I see at the moment.
All right. So what I will forward over to you is the flow chart of this resource guide, and then we can share with you guys the updated SIP that we've just recently received within the last quarter or so. And so you have those both as resources.
Okay, thank you so much, Jay.
Yes, thank you so much, Jay, for all that extremely helpful information. We did get a couple questions in the chat about if this document will be available, and we have uploaded it to our ICCB CTE webpage. It's under the Perkins 5 tab and then the Perkins Guidelines and Applications sub-tab. So this is linked. We will link the presentation. We will link the recordings there. The guidelines are linked there. And then we will also make sure to put all of those applicable links for amplifund on that webpage as well, just so everything's in one spot. Whenever we get the amplifund FAQs together, we'll also make sure to put that there as well. I just wanted to thank everybody for participating today. I hope everyone wore green. I really tried my hardest to think of some kind of team time activity we could do for people who wore green and who didn't wear green, but you're in luck because I was unable to think of that. But there was one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is in reference to drawdowns for Perkins funds. So we just received the latest amount for federal Perkins funds drawdowns for March, and it looks like only a few colleges have requested at least 50% of their funds. Now, I know that the last day to submit a payment request is not until August 1st. However, it's just getting down to that time when we want to start making sure that everything's going okay. You know, are you having problems spending your money? I know this past year has been a strange one for expending your funds. So your Perkins liaisons will be reaching out to you early next week just to make sure everything's going okay, and just to get you thinking about starting to request some of those funds from ICCB. So, but that is all I had. If there are any lingering questions in the chat, we'll make sure we get those answered. And again, thank you so much for joining. I hope this was helpful, and we'll talk to you later. Everyone have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.